Everyone talks about cruising from Seattle for the obvious reason. Those incredible mountain views, heading to Alaska, all those bucket list destinations. But I've discovered what really makes Seattle Cruise Port exceptional, and it's not what you might expect. First, there's this game-changing luggage service at the end of your cruise that I wish every port offered. Second, Seattle has incredible attractions practically at the doorstep of the cruise terminals. And I've discovered the perfect way to see and do it all without the typical tourist hassles or high costs. Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. And today we're going to dive deep into everything you need to know about cruising from the Seattle Cruise Port, officially called the Port of Seattle. This is hands down one of my favorite departure ports in the entire country. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. Now, Seattle is best known as the launch pad for those incredibly popular Alaskan cruises, but you'll also find some more exotic itineraries sailing from here as well, like trans-Pacific sailings to Japan and Hawaiian cruises. If you're taking any cruise from Seattle, consider yourself lucky because this port really does have a lot to offer. Seattle sits off the northwest coast of Washington State along the edge of Elliott Bay on Puget Sound. Not only are the cruises bound for destinations that sit at the top of most cruisers' bucket list, but this is a city that's genuinely fun to visit and explore both before and after your cruise. Now, here's something really important that catches people off guard. The Seattle cruise port season typically runs from late April through early October because that's when ships head north to Alaska. Almost all Alaska itineraries include a stop in Canada, usually in Vancouver or Victoria, and this is because of this weird old US maritime law. It's kind of outdated, but it's still in effect, called the Passenger Vessel Services Act, or the PVSA. This requires foreign flag ships to call on a foreign port. This means that if you're taking that Alaskan cruise out of Seattle, you absolutely will need a valid passport. And here's a critical part that you need to know that can derail your entire cruise. Cruisers with felony convictions can be denied entry to Canada, which can prevent you from boarding or cause major issues mid-itinerary. So if that applies to you, you've got some stuff in your record, definitely check on that before you book your Alaskan cruise out of Seattle or out of anywhere else. Now, when it comes to Seattle, there are two main terminals, and this is where things get interesting. The Seattle Cruise Port has Smith Cove Cruise Terminal at Pier 91 and Bell Street Pier at Pier 66. These terminals are completely different experiences, so it's helpful to know which one that you'll be using. Pier 91 is the larger of the two, and it handles most of the major cruise lines heading to Alaska. These are on cruise lines like Princess, Holland America Line, Carnival, Cunard, and Royal Caribbean. Pier 66 is smaller and centrally located and is primarily used by Norwegian Cruise Line, but you'll also see Oceania cruises here as well. Now, here's what's critical. The two terminals, they're not close together. They're miles apart, about 6 to 10 minutes driving distance. So you do not want to get dropped off at the wrong terminal. So make sure you confirm. If you take an Uber, have a taxi driver, confirm which pier you're going to. Usually they'll know based on the cruise line, but make sure you're going to the right one. Now, if you are sailing from Pier 66, you are in luck because you're right in the center of the fun stuff. It puts you just steps away from Pike Place Market and the Seattle Aquarium. It's literally walking distance to some of Seattle's biggest attractions. Now, if you're at Pier 91, which has always been my experience, unfortunately, there's not much to do right there at the terminal. Now, you'll still get those gorgeous views of the Puget Sound and the Olympic Mountains as you set sail, and even when the ship is there docked. I definitely recommend going up, getting some nice pictures with that beautiful backdrop. You can see the Space Needle off in the distance, but other than the scenic views, there's not much to do at Pier 91. Now let's talk about parking, because if you're driving to your cruise out of Seattle, this is where Seattle really shines with its organization. At Pier 91, the Smith Cove Cruise Terminal, the official parking service is available right there on site in Lot D. This is a secure, gated lot with 24/7 security set up specifically for cruise passengers. The lot is adjacent to the terminal, and it is technically walkable, but there is a complimentary shuttle that runs in a loop between the parking area and the embarkation point. It's super well organized, it's reliable, and very easy to navigate, even if you're juggling kids and or luggage. Here's the pricing breakdown. Economy starts at about $27 per day, standard parking is about $31 per day, and premium spots run closer to $47 daily. For a typical 7-day cruise, you're looking at $187 to $399 total, depending on the tier that you choose. Now, one thing to remember, the lot is large and it's open air, so make note of exactly where you parked. I've heard a lot of horror stories from cruisers who didn't do that, and they had a lot of confusion after their cruise trying to find their cars. So make note of that. The shuttles are small, seating around 14 people, so during peak times, you might have to wait a few rounds of the shuttle to come around to board. Now, if you're going to Pier 66, parking is even more convenient. There you'll be using the Bell Street parking garage at 9 Wall Street. This is a covered parking structure located directly across from the terminal and connected conveniently by a sky bridge. This means that you can walk straight from your car to the ship without having to cross any streets. How cool is that? Now, parking here is also not cheap. It's around $33 per day, or roughly $230 for a 7-day sailing. This also is a secure facility and it has about 1,700 spaces. But here's the catch. The garage does have a maximum vehicle height of 6 feet 6 inches. So if your vehicle is taller than that, you'll need to park at Pier 91 and then catch a cab, a taxi, rideshare to the Bell Street terminal. Now here comes that game-changing luggage service that I love so much about Seattle that I mentioned in the beginning. Seattle has this really awesome thing called Port Valet. It is absolutely amazing. I wish all ports offered this because it makes disembarkation feel so smooth. Port Valet is a free, yes free, no catches, luggage transfer service offered by the Port of Seattle. What they've done is they partnered with most major cruise lines and airlines. Instead of lugging and schlepping your bags off the ship at disembarkation, going through customs and onto a vehicle and all the way to the airport, you simply check them outside your cabin, just like you would at disembarkation if you check your bags, put them outside your cabin tagged on the last night of the cruise. Then the next time you see them is when you land at home. Yes, Port Valet actually gets your bags from the cruise line, which gets them from outside your door. They transport your bags to the airport, get them on the airplane, and you just go and pick them up at the baggage retrieval area. It's awesome. Put them out that last night and you don't have to worry about it till you get home. You don't even have to carry them to the pier. Now, this is available to passengers flying out of the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport on participating airlines, which is not all of them, but it is most of them. And again, it's free. There's no cost to use the service. I highly recommend it. I have heard from a few cruisers here and there in Port Valet. Their bags got lost. I've used it though. It was seamless, flawless, not a problem. And again, this program is unique to Seattle. I've never seen it anywhere else. Now, here is one important caution area. Here's my mistake that I made, even though I have cruised out of Seattle before and I knew better. This is that you cannot miss your cruise line's deadline to complete the paperwork. If you want to participate in the Port Valet service, you can't wait till just the last night. The cruise line will leave a Port Valet participation form in your stateroom several days before disembarkation, and you have to complete and turn in the form as directed, and usually you have to turn it in 2, 3, sometimes more days before disembarkation, depending on your itinerary, the cruise line, and their rules. And if you miss that, you're SOL. So on my last cruise out of Seattle to Alaska, I missed it and I had to schlep my bags and I was not a happy camper. So don't miss that. We tend to ignore all the papers we get in our stateroom because it can feel junky and you get so many of them. I kind of just quit looking at them and I missed it. So don't miss those Port Valet papers because it's a really great free service. Now let's talk about getting to Seattle. Thankfully, it's pretty easy and straightforward. The cruise terminals are located just a few miles from downtown and only about 15 miles from the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Depending on traffic, this is typically a 25 to 35-minute drive from airport to pier, and that goes for either one of them. Most major cruise lines offer transfer service to both terminals. For example, Holland America offers it, and their cost is about $29 per person each way. But here's where you can save money. There are independent transfer service providers that offer sometimes more affordable options than the cruise lines, and you can also always use Uber or Lyft. Sometimes Uber or Lyft, especially if you have multiple people with you, can be much cheaper than the cruise line transfer service. And when it comes to Seattle, rideshare services operate reliably from the airport to both piers. If you do the rideshare route, expect to pay about $50 to $75 for a standard ride, depending on time of day, terminal, surge, pricing, all that stuff. Now, when it comes to Seattle, my preferred way to get around is to use a private driver. I have a go-to guy there named Tulu. He's amazing. I've recommended him to literally hundreds of cruisers. Everyone sings his praises. He's awesome. He drives a premium vehicle. It's an Infiniti QX. I used to have one, great car. And it's ideal for families, larger groups, people with lots of luggage, or people that just like a little more luxury. And in many cases, shockingly, he is about the same price, if not just a little bit more, than an Uber XL. So definitely worth a little bit of extra money. So it's a great option. He actually can meet you at the baggage pickup area if that's your preference. He'll have the little thing holding your name. It feels super fancy. He'll escort you to the car, he'll load your bags, and he'll take you to the pier. And he also offers options if you want to do other stops, he'll take you there as well. For example, at the end of your cruise, you have a lot of time to kill, you have a late return flight home, he can take you around and show you the sights. If you want his information, I'll drop the link below. You can fill it out and I'll put you in contact with Tulu. Now, not everyone likes the little more luxurious, expensive option. For budget-minded cruisers, there is another great option, which is Seattle's Link Light Rail. The ride takes about 45 minutes. It costs just over $3 each way, so you can't get much cheaper than that, and it runs frequently throughout the day. Now, the train does not stop directly at the cruise terminals, so this is really important to know, but it is an easy connection to downtown. And then from downtown, you can grab a quick taxi or a rideshare to your pier. So that's gonna add to your cost, but still a cheaper option than the other alternatives. Now let's talk about embarkation day, because this is where Seattle can be a little bit different than what you may be used to if you've taken cruises, for example, out of the Florida ports. Embarkation can obviously be busy, especially during those peak Alaska season times when you have multiple ships in port at the same time. The terminals are significantly smaller than those other ports, like the ones in Florida, so you can expect sometimes longer than average security and check-in lines. There also aren't as many porters here. I'm used to rolling up to the Florida ports. The minute you get out of the car, there's a porter swarming ready to get your bags. It's not like that so much in Seattle. Sometimes you might have to wait for a porter or even take your bag kind of up to a shared area where then a porter will put it on a cart. So it's a little bit different, not quite as convenient, but the porter service is still available if you're the kind of cruiser that likes to check your bags. Now, when it comes to embarkation, most cruise lines assign boarding windows, but many cruisers do arrive early, which can create bottlenecks. And some cruise lines may or may not actually let you on early. Some will make you wait. It just depends. So embarkation here, it might not be as smooth, quick, and efficient as you're used to at the bigger home port locations, but it's still pretty easy. Now let's talk about disembarkation. Disembarkation is pretty much what you're used to. Thankfully, the Port of Seattle does offer that Port Valet service, so hopefully you're walking off the ship completely unencumbered, other than your small bag, because you do still have to have some of your stuff with you, and always keep your medications, documents, stuff with you. Never send that off with your checked bags with Port Valet, obviously. But disembarkation can be really smooth and easy here. There is a taxi stand. You can call an Uber to get back to the airport or take whatever your preferred method of transportation is. But sometimes you end up in a situation like I have on my last 2 Alaskan cruises out of Seattle, which is I have the dreaded red-eye flight return home. And I get off the ship at 10 a.m. at the latest, and I don't fly out until almost midnight. So what do you do? Here's one of my favorite post-cruise hacks for Seattle, and actually any cruise port for that matter. If your cruise returns, you've got that late return flight home, one smart move is to book a day room. A day room is use of a hotel room for the day, not for the night. So instead of checking in at 4 p.m., spending the night, checking out by 11 a.m. the next morning, you check in usually around 10 or 11 a.m. and you gotta be out by 4 to 6 p.m. depending on the property. So it's made for use for the day, which is why they're called day rooms. But with the day room, you have access to a full-fledged hotel room and the amenities of the hotel, just like you would if you booked it for the night. You can take a shower, you can use the pool if they have one, you can take a nap, you can watch movies or things on the TV, you can relax with Wi-Fi, and it's often cheaper than an overnight stay, which wouldn't work for the hours that you need anyway. It's one of my favorite ways to deal with situations where I have time to kill before I return back from a cruise. Now, if you are in this situation, another option, you might want to explore Seattle's many amazing sites. That's another great option because there's a lot to see and do in Seattle. Now, of course, one option could be to rent a car. That does get a little tricky because there are not car rental locations on site at the pier, and you have to go to the car rental location, rent your car, explore. You might not feel comfortable driving around in Seattle because it's a little crowded and trafficy, and then you have to return the car to get to the airport. So it's a little bit more involved with that. But one option, as I mentioned earlier, is to book a private driver. I've got my guy Tulu. He can pick you up from the cruise terminal. You pre-schedule, you know exactly when he's going to be there. He'll communicate with you. He picks you up with your bags, and then he shows you around wherever you want to go. And he'll actually hold your bags for you in the car while you go explore some of the places, and I'll share with you in a moment some of Seattle's best locations. So that's what I recommend on disembarkation when you've got that late return flight home. Now let's talk about some of the best hotels in Seattle for cruisers, because you do not want to fly in the same day of your cruise, even though it's tempting. I live in the Midwest. I have a 3-hour time difference. I'm always tempted to take an early morning flight, and I've got that 3-hour kind of window and cushion. Just don't do it. Spend the night. And there are some great options in Seattle. Now, Seattle is not a cheap city, so you might have some sticker shock, but here are some great options that come highly recommended from cruisers. First up is 1 Hotel Seattle. It's about a mile from Pier 66 and about 3 miles from Pier 91, and it gives you that downtown stay with easy access to the waterfront. They do provide a complimentary shuttle that covers destination within 2 miles, which includes Pier 66. And they even have a special cruise package that includes private drop-off in a luxury vehicle. Up next is Hyatt House Seattle downtown, set near the Seattle Center. It's just under a mile from Pier 66 and about 2 miles from Pier 91. There is no complimentary airport shuttle, but the hotel can arrange a paid shuttle to the cruise terminals, and that'll cost about $12 per person. You just schedule that at check-in. The Mayflower Park Hotel is a historic boutique property that puts you downtown about 1 mile from Pier 66 and just 3 miles from Pier 91. During cruise season, the hotel offers a scheduled shuttle to both piers that'll cost you about $15 per person, and again, you just book that with the front desk. Finally, if you want to be closer to the airport, there's the Seattle Airport Marriott. This is less than a mile from the airport, so close to the airport, but not as close to the cruise port locations, but not as close to the piers like the other options. The hotel here provides a complimentary shuttle to and from the airport, making that part easy, but it does not provide a free shuttle to the cruise terminals. They do, however, partner with a company called Seattle Express to provide cruise transfers, but it's going to cost you about $27 each way per person. So unless you're a solo traveler, you're probably better off just booking an Uber. And I also want to note too, I have stayed at hotels near the airport in Seattle, and usually suburban hotels around airport locations, there's at least like chain restaurants and some shopping and things like that. I will tell you, it's kind of a vast wasteland in the area around the Seattle airport. So unless you want to just stay at your hotel or you're renting a car or you have a driver, there's not much within walking distance of most of the Seattle hotels near the airport. So I highly recommend spending a little bit of extra money, staying closer to downtown. That is if you care about getting out and seeing sights and doing things. Now let's talk about some of the top sights of Seattle. Of course, we have to start with the Space Needle. It is a Seattle icon and a must-see for any visitor. Built for the 1962 World's Fair, this futuristic observation tower is iconic, and it offers stunning panoramic views of the city. So if you go up, you can actually see those panoramic views of the city skyline. You also get to see Puget Sound and Mount Rainier on a clear day. Now, the top of the tower features a rotating glass floor, which gives you the kind of unique perspective on the city below. Now, I've been up in the Space Needle. I don't need to go again, so I like to admire it from afar. But one place I almost always go, even though I've been a million times, is Pike Place Market. This is a famous bustling public market, and it is a feast for the senses. There are stalls and vendors selling fresh seafood, flowers, bakeries, local crafts, fresh fruits, all kinds of things. You can watch the famous fishmongers tossing fish back and forth. You can grab a coffee at the world's very first Starbucks location and enjoy some of the best clam chowder you have ever tasted. The market is an easy walk from the Bell Street Cruise Terminal. So again, if you're docked at that Pier 66, you're in luck. You're right there. And if you did Port Valet, you don't have to deal with your bags. So after your cruise, you can just walk there and have a nice time at Pike Place. If you are at the other pier though, you do have to get transportation here. Another fun option is the Seattle Great Wheel. It's a giant Ferris wheel located on Pier 57, a different pier, offering a fantastic perspective of the waterfront and downtown. They have enclosed gondolas that are comfortable, and it gives you that vantage point for really beautiful panoramic photos. It is an easy stroll along the waterfront to get there from most of the downtown Seattle area. Located right next to the Space Needle is the Chihuly Garden and Glass Museum. This is an artistic wonderland showcasing the incredible glass sculptures of Dale Chihuly. You see those vibrant colors, the really unique formations of the glass. It's just a really cool experience, especially if you're into artsy stuff. Also at the Seattle Center, you'll find the Museum of Pop Culture, also known as MoPop. It's an immersive and interactive museum dedicated to all things music, sci-fi, and pop culture. It was actually founded by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, and it's a museum that features exhibits on everything. It's really diverse, from Nirvana and Jimi Hendrix to video games and fantasy films, basically pop culture stuff. Now, this one is not close to either cruise terminal, but if you have the time or you have a private driver, it is well worth the visit. Now, if you do have a lot of time to spare and you're comfortable renting a car and you've seen all the Seattle sights, you don't need to see them again. I strongly recommend renting a car and taking the trek out to see Mount Rainier. It is absolutely stunning. I've traveled the world. I've been to 40 different countries. And to this day, Mount Rainier, which I tacked on after an Alaskan cruise, I rented a car, drove to Mount Rainier, spent the day, drove back and took my long red-eye flight home. So I actually did it in the same day as disembarkation. Beautiful. One of the most stunning places I've literally ever seen on Earth. The pictures look like they're photoshopped or fake or AI, and they're not, they're real. So I highly recommend doing this, especially if you love nature. Now, of course, you can do an actual hike, But if you like more aesthetic hiking, which is more my speed, you can take a short hike, get your cute Instagram photos, and enjoy the breathtaking natural scenery. Now, if you've been to Seattle a few times, maybe you've been to Mount Rainier, you don't want to drive all the way out there, you don't have time for it, there are some quirky off the beaten path things that you can explore here. If you like some oddball charm, consider heading south to Oxbow Park in Georgetown to see the giant Hatton Boots, which was once a roadside gas station, but is now a local landmark. There's also the quirky Georgetown Trailer Park Mall, where you have vendors setting up shop in these vintage trailers. Kind of gives a flea market vibe. It feels scrappy and creative. And if you'd rather trade the bustle for calm, you can wander through the Kubota Garden in Rainier Beach. This is kind of a hidden 20-acre Japanese garden that blends maples, bridges, and koi ponds, and a really serene escape that most tourists never find. If you're in the downtown area, consider Waterfall Garden Park in Pioneer Square. This is the small little pocket-sized courtyard with a roaring 22-foot waterfall that is tucked away behind brick walls. Now, if you like something interactive and experiential, check out the Center for Wooden Boats on Lake Union, where you can rent a rowboat or try sailing classes while spotting houseboats and seaplanes overhead. If you're a hockey fan, you'll love the Kraken Community Iceplex, which is the official practice facility of Seattle's NHL team, where you might even catch an open skate or watch the Kraken practice. Now, let me address the elephant in the room. Does it really rain all the time in Seattle? Seattle is famous for being gloomy and rainy. But a fun fact that might surprise you is it actually gets fewer total inches of rain per year than New York or even Miami. Yes, Miami. What gives Seattle its drizzly reputation is the sheer number of gray, misty days. There are around 150 of them each year. But don't be surprised if you encounter beautiful weather. I've been very lucky, and on all but one of my Seattle visits, I actually encountered gorgeous, perfect spring-like weather. Still, come prepared. I always recommend bringing a hooded, lightweight jacket and a portable umbrella. Another thing to do in Seattle is to explore the food scene, because it is a food lover's dream. There are lots of local favorites. Fresh salmon is a must, whether it's smoked, grilled, or in a sandwich. You do not want to miss the chowder at Pike Place Market, especially from Pike Place Chowder, which regularly wins national awards. I've talked to people who even normally don't like chowders or clam chowder or seafood, and they actually like it. Another thing to do is stop at Beecher's Handmade Cheese for their famous gooey mac and cheese, grab a dozen mini donuts from the Daily Dozen Donut Company, and of course, try a cup of coffee either at the Starbucks Reserve Roastery or in the very first Starbucks location right at Pike Place. It gets really crowded, but if you get there early, you can miss all the crowds and the lines. If you're hankering for a sweetie treaty at Three Girls Bakery in Pike Place Market, right down from the original Starbucks, they've been serving fresh pastries for more than a century. I stopped by, very good, tasty, fresh pastries. And you'll also find an abundance of seasonal fresh fruit stands throughout the market. Vendors selling little plastic cups of fresh cherries, berries, Washington apples, things like that. If chocolate is your thing, Fran's Chocolates near the waterfront is a local institution. So whether you're eating, exploring, looking at the Space Needle, or driving out to Mount Rainier, there's so much to do in Seattle. So if you're taking a cruise here, I recommend tacking on an extra day either before and or after to see all that this beautiful city has to offer.